Hi, everybody, and welcome. This is me. Over the years, I have been repeatedly asked what I believe in, why I'm not a Christian, if I believe in God, whether I'm an atheist or not. And today I finally want to sit down and just talk about that. Not only for everybody who's been asking, but also maybe primarily for myself, because I feel like if I put all of this down and publish this video, I will feel a little bit more fulfilled. For a year, I have been wanting to make this video, but I felt like if I put everything down that I want to say about this, it will be many hours long. I tried it again and again, and I didn't know how to approach this topic. So today I just want to sit down and talk straight. I am an atheist, as mentioned before. I'm not agnostic about my atheism, so I am not the one who says that we do not or cannot know whether God exists or not. I would say that I am gnostic, sure, in my atheism. So I certainly reject the belief in God, and I am convinced that God does not exist. That said, mine is not a kind of positive, assertive atheism. I certainly do not believe in God. I'm convinced that there is no God, but I also don't go ahead trying to preach to people that God does not exist and that this is a lie, that there is no deity. What matters to me is that I don't believe. And maybe I'm close to what is called agnosticism or non-cognitivism, where the thought is that the question, does God exist, is rather irrelevant or a meaningless question because the word God itself does not carry any proper meaning, any defined meaning. It's rather an idea that emerged and was shaped over time by people in different ways. We are only talking about the existence of God because we are in a culture and a time where that is important, where believing in God is the norm, where it's relevant. In a different time or place, the question, does God exist, wouldn't even matter. People would wonder why we are talking about this. Even when we are talking about the one God, who is the creator, the shape, the nature, the purpose of this God has changed from time to time and is different between different religions. It changes from Judaism to Christianity, it changes from Christianity to Islam massively. In Hinduism, the creator God is a completely different being and doesn't carry the same importance or the same attention. In many East Asian religions, God is not a person but rather just a force. In Buddhism, there is no eternal creator. In some of these religions, the creator is a conscious, very powerful, independent being that has power over everything, whereas in other religions, this force or this God is impacted by humans and by beings. In some religions, this God is worshipped, whereas in other religions, he's not worshipped or doesn't have to be worshipped. So when I'm asked, does God exist? Then I think about the biblical one God. But if I thought more universally, then I would say, what do you mean by does God exist? What is God, and why is this question relevant? I think this even puts me into a more peaceful position regarding God, since I'm not out there to fight God. So, long story short, I'm certain and I don't believe in the one God. Yet I don't actively want to spread the idea that God doesn't exist. And when it comes to the one God, then I am certainly an atheist. I don't believe that he exists. But if we want to talk about a force in the universe or whatever you mean, then I will say it doesn't really matter. And you and I are both equally ignorant. It doesn't matter what you are or what I am. But okay, let me come to the topic. Why I don't believe in God. I think one of the most problematic things for me when I was a Muslim was to look at a map of the distribution of religious groups and to think a little bit further about that. In fact, I'll do it right here. There are many maps which show the distribution of religious groups. Here is one of them. Some of these maps may divide Christian beliefs into separate religions, and some do the same with Islam. But I think it's totally sufficient to simply look at a map that colors the map by the major religions. When I look at this map, I see something that I could never unsee when I was a Muslim. And as someone who really loves maps, it always disturbed me when I came across a map of religions. What I see is that the religion that you believe in depends very much on the circumstances that you are brought into when you are born. If you are born in the middle of America, you are very likely to be born into Christianity. If you are born in Italy, you are even more likely to be a Christian. In Poland, even more. If you are born in Saudi Arabia, you are almost definitely a Muslim. If you are born in Pakistan or Egypt, you are again most likely a Muslim. And this only scratches the surface. I was born in Germany, which is predominantly Christian, although Germans don't really care that much about religion anymore. But since I was born into a Turkish Muslim immigrant family in Germany, I was born into Islam and was raised as a Muslim. Most people who, like in my case, are born into such Muslim families would live their lives as Muslims and die as Muslims. Most of them would never change their beliefs. I was just an exception. I had different interests, a different personality, maybe a combination of things that happened in my life, and I chose to abandon my beliefs and to change them. But most people don't do that. In modern times, religious interactions may have become much more common, but still, most people stay within the religions that they are born into. Only few people abandon their religion, and only a very tiny number of people, maybe a statistically insignificant number of people, convert to a different religion permanently. And this intrusive idea that I always got when I looked at this map is, how could I possibly believe that my religion is the true one, the right one, the good one, when the conviction that my religion is the right one only depends on where I am born and in what time I am born? Instead of leaving my religion, I could have gone into Muslim apologetics, and I could have made many arguments that are very convincing in favor of Islam, arguments that I would have thought were very solid. Muslim arguments are very laughable to me right now, but to the average Muslim who wants to stay within Islam, Islam is quite convincing. And to them, their arguments are very solid, even if to me they look very ridiculous. Well, Christians also make very solid arguments for their religion, or so they believe. Protestants make solid arguments, Orthodox Christians make solid arguments. Catholics make solid arguments for their beliefs, Sunni Muslims make solid arguments. Shia Muslims make very convincing arguments as they believe. Hindus make solid arguments, Jews make solid arguments. As long as you want to justify your beliefs, you will find solid arguments. All of them believe that their own convictions are definitely very reliable, very solid. And they believe in that just as much as I did when I was still a Muslim and I believed in the defenses of my religion. How could I, in a world where I don't know anything, and I learn all my life, and I realize over and over again that I don't know anything, that I am ignorant, that we are ignorant, that humans have been ignorant for so long, that we still don't know some very basic things about the seas around and under us, about the space that is above us or around us? How could I be sure that in this ignorant world, in this flawed world where we constantly make so many decisions that turn out to be complete failures, how could I be sure that I have the right answer? And that I was, by coincidence, by a chance, by a blessing, born into the right one, the right answer? How could I possibly believe that? We still don't know how the brain really works. We're making progress. We've begun to figure it out quite recently, and we're making a lot of progress. But we still don't properly understand much of the brain, which is us, which is our motherboard. What we understand so far from it is that we humans make many judgments and have made many judgments in history that are incredibly wrong, but we always think that we are onto something. And we rather want to feel safe and comfortable about our beliefs instead of inquiring further and admitting that we may be mistaken or that we may have been mistaken. Because why challenge and risk changing everything when we can just accept our assumptions and go with the flow without disturbing the system which works? Why bother looking for more answers when we can just live in comfort with whatever people believe in? Knowing this, how could I believe that my beliefs, which my culture adopted at some point, which I was gladly, happily born into, are the right beliefs, and all the others are wrong? Even if some of us go on greater journeys and experience different cultures and change our beliefs throughout our lives, we are very few. Most people simply spend their lives believing in whatever their parents believed in, even if they differ a bit in their precise practices and beliefs. They usually think that the beliefs that they were born into, which their parents held, are of course true. And there are so many convincing arguments, so many convincing reasons to believe in it. Of course it's true. I keep thinking about all those people, most people, the vast majority of people, who never question their beliefs, who never end up changing any of their beliefs, and it's okay. It's not their fault. As said, they are simply abiding by the circumstances which they were born into. Think about this. If you're a Christian watching this, think about being born into a religious Muslim family in a place in Pakistan, where more than 95% of people are Muslims. It may seem absurd and outlandish to you right now to believe in Islam, which is this absurd belief that is so obviously wrong and so obviously terrible. But that's only because you were not born there in those circumstances. It's because you are a Christian. If you were in that guy's position in Pakistan, in that place where 95% of people in your surrounding and your family are Muslims, then you would also most likely, almost certainly, be born as a Muslim, live your life as a Muslim, and die as a Muslim. And you would be offended by Muhammad cartoons, by the way. Most likely, there would be no way for you to ever come to the conclusions that you have right now as a Christian who was born in America, for example. There would be no way for you to ever convert to Christianity, no matter what kinds of scenarios people want to offer you right now to justify your beliefs. We are very lucky in the 21st century. Let's go back 500 years. It was extremely uncommon compared to today to interact with other religions, to learn about different religions. Today, the least informed individual can use their smartphone, which we use more commonly to look at much less intelligent things, to learn the basics about most major religions in the world. In a week, you can learn much of the important stuff, or most of the important stuff, about all the major religions, and you can have a fairly good understanding about them. It may be a bit of a headache, but it's possible. So it's easy for us nowadays to sit here and say, yeah, I could have converted to that religion, but it's obviously wrong, so why would I do that? I'm totally convinced with my own. The average person 500 years ago didn't even have the luxury to think about any of this, and to question whether they should stay a Muslim or a Christian, or convert to a different religion. I think the point here is clear. We are born into different times and geographies, and the beliefs that we have depend on the time and the place that we are in. But the problem does not end by just saying, religions depend on our circumstances, which is why all religions are wrong because they are random. Let's come back to the topic, God. According to Islam and Christianity, you have to believe in God, and you have to believe in its scripture, in its commandments, and the rules of these religions. You must have the right beliefs in order to avoid eternal punishment. In Christianity, you must believe in Jesus, God, to be saved, in order to avoid hell. Whether you see that place as a place of eternal suffering or of physical torture is irrelevant right now. In Islam, you must believe in Allah and Muhammad and the Quran in order to go to heaven and avoid brutal eternal punishment in hell. But taking into consideration everything that I have just talked about, the map, the religious distribution, and how our beliefs depend on our circumstances, is this really just? Is God, or Allah, really fair? If he is not fair, can we still believe in him? As explained, believing in these religions completely depends on where you are born. Born in Saudi Arabia, Muslim. Born in Russia, Christian. Born in Pakistan, Muslim. Born in America, Christian. Born in India, Hindu. Born in China, atheist or Buddhist. If you are born in Japan, you are probably an atheist or a Shinto or something new. Most likely you are neither Christian nor Muslim. When your religious beliefs mostly depend on your environment and your conditions which you can do nothing for, does it then really make sense that God punishes or rewards people based on what they believe in when they die? If Islam is true and Allah is the one true God, then that means that the vast majority of those who are born into Christianity are doomed and will go to hell by default, because only few of them will become non-Christians and only a very tiny number of people will ever convert to Islam. If Christianity is true and you have to follow Jesus in order to be saved, then the average person born in Pakistan as a Muslim is by default doomed, because he strictly believes in the truth of Islam and will most likely not question their belief ever. It means the vast majority of those people who are born into Islam, who are born as Muslims, are doomed to live an empty life and probably go to hell forever and never to be saved because of where and when they were born. I don't have to make big claims about how people experience religion. We know by experience that most people simply don't seek and don't inquire. Most people are loyal to the religion that they belong to. Could it really be that somebody named Marcus, who is born as a Christian in America and just does what he is supposed to do without ever questioning it, without ever seeking and thinking much, who just worships or doesn't worship and lives his life in a good or a bad way, could it really be that this person does nothing but simply to just live in conformity and to exist? But he dies as a Christian because he was born into Christianity and he therefore goes to heaven. But I, or somebody in Afghanistan, for example, someone who has looked for the truth all his life, but who simply couldn't find the right answer, who couldn't find the truth, will go to hell simply because he couldn't be convinced by anything, although he really wanted to. Don't come at me with, if you just look into your heart, if you really want it, if you just let God do his work, if you just sincerely ask God, then he will reveal himself to you. It doesn't work that way. That's what Christians say, it's what Muslims say, and what others say. It doesn't work. That's how you think it works because that's how you feel, because you believe in it, because you feel the emotion, the rush, but it's not true. To every Christian who will tell me that if you just ask God and if you sincerely want it, then God will reveal himself to you, and that you feel this connection because they communicate with you, I have to tell you, as a religious Muslim, I thought the same thing and I felt the same thing. I felt the same connection. I felt overwhelmed. It was right there. It was heavy. It was sweet. It was beautiful. Sometimes it even felt like it made me drunk because I felt so in love with it. And yet I have encountered so many Christians who have described basically the same thing in different words. I know some people will really try to tell me that what I experienced as a Muslim was actually the wrong thing. It was actually something different, and only the feeling that you feel as a Christian is the right thing, and that is guidance. Just as a Muslim will tell us that what Christians feel is actually misguidance and that it is Satan touching them, whereas what Muslims feel is of course right. And who is the judge here who will point at the right one and the wrong one? You? Me? Other humans who are so mistaken by default? Who are so wrong about so many things in the world again and again, just like me? Isn't it so obvious that it is all so subjective and so biased that it's all the same? But hey, let's put the divide between Christianity and Islam and Christians and Muslims aside. Let's say that monotheism is true. Let's talk about China. What about the guy in China? In China, it doesn't even matter whether you believe in God or not. The question is completely irrelevant. It wouldn't make sense for an average Chinese person to sit here and to explain to the Chinese people why he doesn't believe in God. Because nobody believes in God. People would just sit and be like, why are you telling us this? Most people in China don't believe in God. The question doesn't mean anything to them. And this is not an active act of disbelief, of disbelieving. No, the question is unfamiliar to them. The concept of God is unfamiliar to them. They're not discussing whether they do believe or don't believe in God. The question doesn't exist. It's irrelevant. Most people in China will never become Muslims and will never become Christians and will never find the one true God. So why do they exist? How is it conceivable that one religion is true, one God is true, and he expects everybody to seek and find him? That he expects every Chinese person to seek and find this true religion, to find this true God, but most Chinese people never engage in that, let alone being successful. They all just live and die without ever thinking about God, while we are sitting here talking about whether God exists or not, like it is a universal existential question. Because to us, this is an existential question, because we have a history of Abrahamic monotheism. But they don't, which is why it's not even a trivial question to them. Meanwhile, according to Islam, Islam is true, and all those people who are born into Islam will conveniently go to heaven because they will live as Muslims and die as Muslims, even if they don't do anything. And no one has an answer about all those poor Chinese people whom Allah has created or God has created, but that He doesn't seem to care about. Yeah, I know, some people may nitpick and may complain about how simple I make it seem, but it simply is that simple. You could explain that as a Christian you are expected to do certain things, and as a Muslim you are expected to worship and do this and that. But both religions believe in the same conclusions. Yes, you may need to do certain things, but regardless, if you believe, then you will eventually go to heaven. You are eventually admitted to the good place, no matter how sinful or how lazy you are, because you did believe in the true religion. Even if someone is a terrible person who has a bad temper and who doesn't treat people very well, who deceives and is a wrongdoer, that person is still considered good and goes to heaven because he is a believer. But if I live my life in the best way possible and I'm kind to people and I share, then I still go to the bad place. And I'm a bad person because I simply didn't believe in God, because it didn't make sense to me, because I wasn't convinced. I'm long not done explaining that the idea of the one God is based on an unjust God. And I could go on and explain further that it doesn't make any sense, and that the injustice of God leads to disbelief, but I want to give only one more example in that regard. Let's forget about other religions. Let's assume one religion is true, and that the one God exists, and believing in Him is a must. That's the meaning of our life, because why else are we here? And He created you and me. I am brought onto this world, onto this road as a human, and I'm expected to come to this part of the road where it splits in two. There I'm expected to make a decision. I am a flawed human, created flawed, and I am to make a crucial decision to go left or right. If I believe and I go right, then that means I've made the right decision and I will go to heaven. If I disbelieve and go left, then that means I made the wrong decision and condemn myself forever to hell. Let's put aside the fact that we as humans learn to forgive others for their gravest mistakes, because we know that humans are flawed and they make wrong decisions and terrible judgments all the time. Whether it is due to their ignorance or short-sightedness, or genuine goodness or momentary arrogance, or their egoism. We forgive and we find virtue in forgiveness because we know that everybody makes mistakes. But God, the Almighty, who created us all, and who knows us better than we know anybody else and ourselves, the God who created us flawed, punishes us eternally, simply for one wrong decision, no matter how big the decision is: disbelief. Let us put that cruelty aside. I just had to take a short break because my camera died. God created us and gave us free will, and before He created each and every one of us, He knew exactly in His eternal, perfect wisdom what each one of us would eventually do with that free will. That if He gave me, for example, free will, I would use my free will in the wrong way, take the wrong turn, make the wrong choice, and go to hell. And yet He created me. Yes, He did give me free will, and theoretically it is then my choice. But as said, even before He planned to create me and before He planned to give me that free will, He knew exactly what I would do with that free will and that I would eventually go to hell. He created me with that free will. He created my ability to choose. He created my ability to make the wrong choice. He created the punishment, the place of punishment. He created my wrong choice. He created me with that mistake, but He punishes me after I live my flawed life and make that mistake. Some people may want to nitpick some details about this and correct some aspects again, and some Christians may want to explain that evil came into existence because of the fall of humans, while Muslims may want to argue that Allah made an agreement with everybody before He created us. But these objections don't work and they don't matter. Even if humans did fall and corrupt the world with sin, God still created the world, the past and the future. He established and made everything by a plan. It is part of His plan that humans would fall and that sin would come forth. If not, then God made a wrong plan or an unstable plan. God made a mistake in His calculations, or God was just experimenting with something and allowed evil to happen in His own creation. He could have created something perfect, but He created something flawed, which then went wrong, and He decided to punish everyone for that. If this was not all in God's hand, if He didn't know, if this just happened, then God is not all-knowing or almighty. He could have just created humanity beautifully without sin, or without eternal punishments for sin. But instead, He created this strange plan where we all go through this life and have a test, and then go to heaven and hell. Why ever? It was His choice to do that. If, according to Islam, Allah made an agreement with humans before He created us, then that doesn't matter either. It doesn't change the point at all. Allah still created us as flawed beings, and He created evil. He created our lives, created our choice. He created the punishment, and He created billions of us just for hell. It doesn't make sense. Despite all of that, I am to believe that this God is good. It is impossible for me to believe that. If the goodness that I learned, even by the standards of Islam and Christianity, and so many other cultures of our time, if the kindness, the love, the forgiveness, if all that is good, then God is not good. No, it is not complicated. God is not above this. And no, God does not have some reason which we do not understand. That's only an excuse. And that is the only conclusion that Christians and Muslims can come to in this giant dilemma. to say we simply do not comprehend it, we simply do not understand it. We just have to believe and leave the rest to God because He knows what He's doing. But sorry, that's not an acceptable answer. There is obviously a huge problem, a huge logical flaw here, which cannot be solved, and you cannot simply dismiss that by saying, well, we don't understand it, we should just put it aside and look at other things. It is very clear. Let's point at it, and let's say it does not make sense. And if we need to, we can put ourselves into that God's position and look at it again. If there was only me, and I decided for some reason to create a world and create imperfect, ignorant, flawed beings that I want to exist and to live life, and I would then really, out of love, create a bad place for these people of eternal suffering, and then put these people onto some random planet in a giant universe, and then let them go through a test, which I created directly or indirectly, whereafter many of those beings will go to a place of eternal punishment. Would I really create those sensitive beings with the ability to make that wrong choice, and create that bad place of suffering for that wrong choice, and then send people to that place for making that wrong choice? That is an extremely sadistic thing to do. I would not do that. And neither would you. If we knew somebody who really wants to do that, then we would think that that person has a serious problem. This is not God. This is not good. It's not love. This is problematic. It contradicts its own sense of morality. Some people attempt to compare this to a father and a son, and a father wants to help his son, and because the father knows best what's for the son, the father offers the son to go through some things that the son doesn't like going to the doctor or going to the dentist, or abiding by certain rules which the son doesn't like. But the father prepares him for a world, and those rules are necessary for that son. But that comparison is inaccurate. It's a false comparison. The father makes those rules and takes his son to the dentist and takes him to the doctor, creates restrictions which the son doesn't like, because the father and the son are both beings, humans that exist in this world, which has conditions which the father is aware of, and his power is limited, and he tries to prepare his son. That's not an accurate comparison to God and us. If the father of that son could change all the conditions and could change the world, and could make it possible for the son to never experience any suffering, but to still live a wonderful, great life, then the father would probably do that. But the father is a powerless figure in a world where norms and rules exist that are out of his hand, and he is only trying his best to help his son. Whereas God is supposed to be the creator of all conditions, of everything that exists. And in the creation of such a God, it is absolutely unnecessary to have suffering, to have evil, to have eternal suffering. It could all just have happened without that. How could I possibly believe that all my life I looked for the right answer, but I could simply not find it because I couldn't be convinced? Forget about me for a second, even if I did end up believing. There will be millions, billions of other people in the world who simply will not be convinced and who will end up not believing, although they really want to. Or others who didn't even take it that seriously because they weren't aware that this is such a crucial question, such a crucial problem. And God will punish them forever because of their ignorance, because of their wrong decision, because of their mistake. I simply do not see any way to accept that. If we forget about evil and morality and heaven and hell and all of that for a second, isn't the whole creation and the nature of God kind of strange? We are told that in the beginning there was only God and there was nothing else, and He decided to create us. This kind of implies that God always did exist, but at some point He decided to create us. It looks like God had no story, no significance, no importance at all without us. God's journey began with us. Does it make sense that there was nothing but only God for eternity or pre-eternity, and then God suddenly decided to create us? And that's where God's story began. Did God just exist there before us? How long in eternity did it take for God to come to that conclusion? Does that question even make sense? Why did He feel the need to make such a decision? Why did He feel? Does God feel? Why? Is God a social God, or did He just create His feelings? his own desires, his own thoughts, and his own language as part of this game which he also created in order to create us. I don't want to immerse too much into this, but it feels a little bit arrogant and even a bit cruel of us humans to assume that this God, who is eternal, created us, and we are what give this God importance. We give him meaning because on his own he's quite meaningless, isn't he? It's almost like God depends on us rather than we on him. It's almost like God is our creation. It is extremely hard for me to believe in this. It's almost impossible. I would much rather believe that something always did exist and that it constantly develops, like our intelligence and our knowledge, which is why humanity has gradually advanced, than believing in ancient myths of a strange, uncreated master creator, an eternal master who created creation, who created us with such high priority just because he wanted to. There are many more reasons beyond these why I don't believe in God and in religions. If I extensively talked about these, it would take so much time. For example, the fact that people had all kinds of different ideas and mythologies. And we only have remnants of what some people at some point believed in. How they attempted to explain the world around us in times where they didn't even have basic answers to simple things in the world. We have only recently found out, or relatively recently found out, that the world does not consist of this surface that we are on. That we are not at the center of the cosmos, that the sun is not the center of the cosmos, that our solar system is not the only world that exists, that there are other planetary systems, that there are other galaxies, that we are in a vast universe. These are all things that we quite recently found out. Yet all religions that we have are remnants from times where we didn't know most of these things, and where people tried to explain the meaning of life as they understood it. Despite all of this, I am expected to believe some prophets or scribes that lived so long ago, who are somehow supposed to give us the right answers to everything. I am expected to trust what they are supposed to have said, because some people at some point in history told other people that they have witnessed these certain prophets or individuals do certain miracles or communicate with a god or an angel. And we are somehow to trust all this chain of people when we can't even trust our neighbors, when we can't even trust ourselves. How can I know that I can barely trust myself, that I cannot even go through with my own plans, that I have so many temptations and discipline issues, that I can't trust my own eyes, my own knowledge, but I am to trust these people from history that I cannot even properly verify, and their reports of other people who communicated with other people who communicated with God or who were God. If there is a God, and our purpose is to find that God, and that God wants us to find him, and he doesn't by default want us to go to hell, then why is it not simple to find the true answer? Why do we have to go through books, through ambiguous reports, interpretations, apologetics, different churches, different mosques and temples, different teachers and preachers, all claiming that they have the right answers, while they disagree with each other and have thousands of different versions of the truth? Just the existence of apologists makes me think, seriously? There is a struggle here. We have to rely on other humans like you and me to convince us of this God? That seems very unstable. In a world where we now understand that only this planet existed for nearly 4 billion years, whereas our universe is thought to have existed for 14 billion years almost. And so many species existed, and there is a vast universe with myriads of planets which possibly harbor life, maybe even intelligent life. How could I believe that all of this, for 14 billion years, was just God creating us on this random planet, after 14 billion years of nothingness, by the way? Just so we would have a history of a few thousand years, go through this game and believe in him, and go to heaven. I know some people don't want to believe that everything existed this long, and I don't even want to argue that. Don't see this as a distraction of the whole. These are just some details. Now, of course, much of what I said would just disqualify the one God, with his books and prophets and expectations and conditions. On the other hand, I could still believe in a God that is within everything, or in a deistic model of God without religion, or in nature, or the Hindu Godhead. But why would I do that? What is the point? Why does everything exist? Why are we part of an eternal thing? A mysterious endlessness where we are born and we die, and we are reincarnated, or everything begins and ends and begins again. Why do we exist because of some God? Why are these our answers? Why would that possibly be the answer? Because some people thousands of years ago figured it out, and we have books from those people which we can't even verify. Why am I to trust any of that? I don't trust anybody. I don't trust you. I don't trust myself. It would be unwise to trust that other people who are just as ignorant, just as flawed, just as stupid as I am, know the right answer to everything. They know the truth. No matter how hard I try to find an existential necessity to believe in a God, it doesn't make sense. It fails. It is an entity that is entirely based on ancient myths or modern speculations, and I simply cannot find a reason why anyone would be obligated to believe in that. If we want to believe in God just because, then what is the point of that? We would simply be believing in something which we have absolutely no reason to believe in. And especially if we design our lives according to this baseless belief, then we would base our whole life, our one life, on something that we have no reason to believe in. No picture, no magic, no evidence, nothing at all. Believing out of fear, which is what many people, maybe even most people do, is just as unreasonable. We are again afraid of speculations, with no basis at all. Nothing in history has ever turned out to be of a supernatural, magical origin. No miracle has ever turned out to be a miracle. Nothing has ever turned out to verify these mythological, magical religious claims that people have made. And miracles seem to have mysteriously stopped since the invention of cameras and of mass media and the internet. All that we know is that we are beings and we exist, and we are seemingly more intelligent than the animals around us. We have a long history of which we can only recall a few thousand years because that's when we became a little bit intelligent. We developed smarter ways to communicate and to keep records. And in those few thousand years, we have made a lot of progress, found out a lot of things. And all that we know is that we are on a planet revolving around a star with other planets and other objects. A star that revolves around the center of a galaxy which is also moving. And when it's night and dark and we look at the sky, we see so many more objects that people fairly recently thought were just these small bright stars, but that we now know are giant objects, like our sun. And those giant objects, those giant stars point at so much more out there which we don't know about. So much to see and so much to find out. And just a century ago, we didn't even properly understand this. There are still so many people in this world who don't understand any of this. Who are you? Who am I? Who are we to make big claims about a God who created you and me just because it feels good to believe? Because it feels like we have an answer and we can go through life and the painful ignorance of our existence more easily. I could talk about this forever, but this is basically a short summary of why I don't believe in God. And again, I'm not here to say you shouldn't believe in God. No, you don't know the truth. I don't know the truth. We all just want to know the truth. We are all simply seekers, living our lives, trying to do what we think is best. So I will not tell you not to believe in God. I'm simply telling you why I don't believe in God. I will just tell you that I wish you all the best. Best of luck in your search for truth. Thank you for listening and have a good day.